You're listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast with Matt Tomasi and can be found at borntokickarse.com/episode 33.
Welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast, where you're introduced to the most fascinating people on the planet. Learn the ingredients of greatness that you can apply to your life. And now your host, Matthew Tomasi.
Hello, listeners. Podcasting is an awesome way for me to share my passion with the world and provide you with inspirational interviews. The only downside with podcasting is that it's one-way communication. My guest and I talking and you listening. Now is the time for me to start building a kick-ass tribe with people like you. People who listen to my podcast, people who hear where I'm coming from, people who want to improve themselves and want to kick ass in life. Let's start building a relationship. To get the ball rolling, I need you right now to head to my website, borntokickarse.com, and sign up for my free newsletter. Once again, that's borntokickarse.com. Once you've signed up, I'll be able to find out from you what you want to improve in your own life, whether it's creating your own website or launching a podcast, or you want to improve your health, or you want to set and achieve big goals, or whatever it may be. Sign up now. I'm looking forward to connecting with you. Stuart Walter is a professional clinical hypnotherapist and NLP practitioner specialising in elite performance. Regarded as Australia's #1 for sports hypnotherapy, Stuart's clients include Olympians, professional sports people, national, Commonwealth and World Champions. In this episode, Stuart talks about how hypnotherapy can be applied to both athletes and non-athletes alike and the power of a positive mindset. Enjoy the interview. Stuart Walter, welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast.
Oh, looking forward to this one. Sounds great.
So you are a hypnosis and NLP master, specialising in sports hypnosis, and a lot of your clients include Olympians, national and Commonwealth, and you've coached 32 world champions. Yeah,
32. We just missed out a 33rd on the weekend at one of the half Ironman world champs, so not far off.
Yeah, I want to get into sports hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? How can it benefit athletes?
Yep.
But before we do, can you give us a background on yourself? Were you into sports growing up, and what led you onto the path of hypnosis?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, it's interesting past. I look back now and I kind of look at it with a different perspective. It's like the older we get, the better we were. I was one of these kids with just a natural skill, natural ability within sports, whether it be swimming, whether it was soccer at school. And interesting enough, my older brother, he was getting bullied quite badly at school. So parents sent us through to learn judo in Sydney. And it was interesting. It was fascinating. I just took to that like duck to water, basically. And we moved up to Queensland. I thought, I'll get back into that again and do some more judo because I was sort of brown belt down there. And I thought, yeah, okay, this is good. And it's a totally different teaching method when we moved to Queensland. So fast track it a bit and I went, right, let's do something different. So I saw back in '88 Olympics and in Seoul, and obviously the home of Taekwondo is Seoul Olympics, and they actually had it as demonstrator sport. So I decided at that point in time that that's where I'm going to go. Taekwondo, it looked a lot more dynamic, not unlike what you see on the TV these days. And I just went, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. What was interesting, karate at the time wasn't actually part of the Olympics. And I just went, oh, I could probably do something like this to get into Taekwondo. But as it was announced, there was a lot of martial artists that had come from other forms of martial arts that came across at the same time. We all basically started as a white belt. And within 3 to 6 months, I was kind of in there and sort of battling these guys with black belts in previous forms in karate, and I just found it so easy. Now, I picked up the state title back in 94, I think it was, for Taekwondo, the Queensland title. And yeah, I just found that quite easy. And then for the next about 3 years, Matthew, I really struggled because I thought if I can do this so easily, and I was still holding down a full-time job, married at the time, and everything was a real battle. It was just really inconsistent. So as everyone does, they talk to their mother, and my mum just happened to be a hypnotherapist and naturopath. And she said, I can help you with that. And I went, okay, what's that? She goes, well, basically, yeah, hypnosis, we'll give that a crack. It'll get rid of a lot of the fears, the doubts, the nerves, the anxiety about your performance. It'll give you that consistent approach. So I sat there for about an hour and a half and just sat there with my eyes closed thinking, how is this going to make a difference? Here's me sitting there listening to my mum about fighting and this and getting in that peak performance state, and literally before you walk into hall, just reach into your stomach and pull out those nerves and throw them away. But I tell you what was interesting that night, because I actually had training, it was like I was 10 foot tall, bulletproof. Sometimes you just kind of get in the zone and you stay there. And I think that's every athlete's dream, to get in that competition mode. And to be honest, my sport changed, my outlook changed, my personality changed, my results changed. And it was just incredible to perform at that. Only athletes who've been in that zone would understand. You can't put a word to it. It's just a feeling. It's just that, I won't say sheer joy of getting beaten up, but it was just so easy. It was so natural. It was so automatic in reaction, and the results were just incredible. And I thought, wow, that is just amazing. And I've struggled for 3.5, 4 years. So anyway, that was sort of back in 98. So I picked up state and national titles 98, 99. And basically I was full on training. And, well, for me, full on training was like 3 nights a week for about 2 hours. So it was not really consistent as far as what you'd expect an elite athlete to be. And I was given the opportunity. We spoke at the end of 99 as far as Olympic trials coming up to Sydney 2000. And unfortunately, at a Christmas party for my now ex, someone brought out a soccer ball, and it's like you're 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And I was just used to spinning on timber floors or on the actual mats that we use in competition. I was just so used to doing that. Brought out a soccer ball, I kicked it with one foot, pivoted on the other with shoes on and sand shoes, and went snap. So partial tear of the ACL and bucket handle tear of the medial meniscus.
Geez, that would have been painful.
Surprisingly, it just went snap, and I think everyone just turned around and looked at me, and I just collapsed in this big ball. And I went, that was interesting. I ended up, I'm not sure if you understand, a bucket handle tear of the medial meniscus. So what actually happens is basically half of the inside of the knee just kind of folded over like a bucket handle would, but as the knee was sort of folded back, so when I straightened it up, it kind of locked into place. So I couldn't actually get full stretch out of it. There was literally no pain. I don't understand how or why, probably because there's no blood within the actual cartilage itself. And so that was kind of it. Arthroscopic surgery, and basically 8 months in a not a cast, but in a brace from my ankle right up to my groin, and that was it, on crutches. And so kind of missed the Olympics, and unfortunately a guy that I used to fight against quite a lot ended up going to the Olympics and ended up in 4th. So I looked at it and went, wow, I know I can get there. I know the power of hypnosis. I know what can happen when you're in the right headspace. And I was also working for a company at the time, 10 years as a national sales manager within a certain brand. And I just thought, hang on, I got the sales experience, I got my sports experience, I totally understand the whole hypnosis situation. And my mum at that point of time, my mum at that point of time said, look, I'm going into retirement and we're just thinking about winding up the business. And at that period of time, my now ex-wife was just pregnant, and I was traveling 2 weeks every month with this other job, and I thought I just need to do something different. And everything just kind of aligned one day, and I went, oh, if I do sports hypnosis and I understand the sports psychology of what I've done, I understand how to get there and what it's like if you don't actually achieve your dream. I also understood from a sales perspective and what can be done. I just went, right, that's what I'm going to do. And interestingly enough, after, I guess, Mum had been practicing about 30 years, and yeah, I signed up to do the course, and within 3 hours, our master trainer just said, right, we're going to hypnotise each other. And I've gone, okay, shouldn't be a problem. And within maybe about 2 minutes, I had him at the deepest level he'd ever been at, the quickest. And he just sort of sat there when he came back out and went, how did you do that? I went, you taught us. And he goes, no, I didn't. I said, well, you said that, and that. I just used the implied suggestion that happened. You do this, you do that, and that's what the end result was. And he went, what, you just learned all that then? I went, yeah. And he said, I've never heard, seen, or experienced anything like that in my past. And I just went, okay, that's good. And from there on, it was just one of those things that I think anyone in any profession, you see people just do something so easily, so naturally, and other people really struggle. And for me, it was just so fortunate that I had this ability and the skill to be able to do it. And even now I just talk to people and I don't know how or why stuff just happens. It's amazing.
Yeah, with the hypnosis, can only certain people with maybe certain personality types be hypnotized? Do you have to be like of a certain personality type or not? You know how like you see on TV, there'll be like a special where some guy, a hypnotist on the stage will have, 12 people up on stage and some of them can get hypnotized and others can't. Can you maybe talk?
Yeah, look, this is the question that everyone asks. It's fascinating when I explain it to people, they kind of get it and they just go, wow, I didn't think it was like that. Now, to be honest, stage hypnosis is the basis of all what we call hypnosis therapy or hypnotherapy. Now, all they look at is, if you look at the stage hypnosis, which is what I've done, if anyone's interested, any of the stuff in B105 over the last 8-10 years, I've done a lot of stuff with those guys on the morning show, doing some fun things like that. I think a lot of people see the stage hypnosis and just think, oh, it's just getting people to do stupid things. But what is actually happening is they're selective of the people who are quite out there. They're quite flamboyant and they're quite large in their, I guess, behaviours. So the people who do stupid things without alcohol basically is the ones you're after. Now, if you've got a group of people, you hypnotise them and say, right, when you hear this music, you start playing the drums, and you'll start seeing some people that are just kind of moving their wrists up and down, and there's no life about them. There's no real movement, but you've got other people that look like they're just going absolutely nuts on the drums. So they're the ones that you kind of want to select because it creates more of an entertainment value. They've got a bigger model of the world. So if you look at the average accountant, you're not going to get them to do much because that's not the typical model of the world. But if you've got someone who's creative, arty, actor, life of the party, basically, you can work anywhere within a certain realm and they're going to do some stupid things. Now, the whole process of, if you look at the stage hypnosis, you can pull a bikie out of the crowd, covered in tattoos, leather, denim. You pull him up on stage, and if you go, right, when you hear this music, you become a ballerina. Now, he'll prance around on stage thinking every cell in his body is this ballerina, but he's got no skills, no abilities, no talents, and that's what creates the entertainment value. Nothing's actually changed as far as behaviour. It's just a suggestion that this is what you're going to do. Now, if you replace that stage hypnotist with me on stage and go, right, let's pull a ballerina out of the crowd, let's get her the music, and now when you hear this music, you become the world's best ballerina. Now, all we're doing is we're starting with someone with skills and talents and abilities, and we're just removing a lot of the external questions and doubts and fears, so there's no inhibitions, and they just become this incredible world best ballerina. So it's a very similar process for the sports and for the athletes.
With the actual process of hypnotising someone, can you talk through that?
Yeah, I can. It's a very simple process. Look, a lot of people, a lot of people's beliefs stem in what they see in movies and what they hear, like the old swinging chain, the spiral. It's all a gimmick. I'm vice president of a national association. I've either been president or national or vice president for the last 8 years. And what's interesting is there's so many people talking about the induction and the deepening process and then something else and a suggestion. For me, it's just a matter of sit back, relax, close your eyes and start imagining. As soon as you do that, you're in that same realm anyway. It's like a guided meditation as such. You don't need to deepen people. You don't need to get a swinging chain or a spiral or something just to get them to close your eyes. There's certain processes and you've just got to work with someone's, what we call their model of the world. So for you, I'd look at, right, okay, just imagine sitting there, closing your eyes and imagine, let's just drift into the future and see where you're going to be in about 2 years' time based on the changes that we're going to make now. And as soon as you do that and you've got your eyes closed, you start imagining, you're already in what we call that hypnagogic state. It's a state between being totally aware and awake and being asleep. So all I do is just enhance that natural relaxation experience and get you towards almost like that meditation type of state, which is still above asleep. So you're very aware of what's going on. You hear the words, you hear the background music, you hear the suggestions, and your mind will be picking up the appropriate bits and pieces because that's only the conscious mind that's actually listening. But it's the communication, it's the pauses, the gestures, the intention, the tone, the tempo of the words we speak. We're actually talking directly at the unconscious level of the mind, not the conscious.
Now, there is another aspect, I think, called NLP. What is NLP and is it different from hypnosis?
It depends on who you talk to. NLP was created through two gentlemen, Grinder and Bandler. And what NLP is, it's basically Neuro Linguistic Programming. Neuro being the brain, linguistic being language, and programming, as I mentioned before, the programs that we run, our model of the world. So breaking it down, NLP is just a whole collection of processes designed to bypass the critical functioning and the processing part of the mind. And all that does is just, it's a structure and a format that when you follow, it opens up the unconscious mind to different suggestions. And if you look at someone like the Anthony Robbins of the world, he's trained directly under the two creators of NLP. Even though he doesn't like to admit it, he's basically talking fluent NLP, which is, as we call it, conversational hypnosis. So when you see these NLP guys, Neuro Linguistic Programming people on stage, a lot of them actually use the power of suggestion, which is almost full of embedded commands to make you do things that you probably wouldn't normally do because they create the hype and the emotional connection and force people into, I won't say force people, but suggest various means of certain behaviors. Now, in a clinical environment, I use these incredibly powerful processes in NLP. Yet what I actually do, instead of working on that conscious level, I use the hypnosis to get those processes down at that deep unconscious part of your mind, which is where the massive change happens. So it happens faster, quicker, and deeper when applied through that hypnosis concept.
If someone's under hypnosis, is the change, is it like a permanent change in some people, or do you need to continually to reinforce, or do people need to continually come back and get hypnotized over time to sort of keep?
Depends on the type of person out here. It really depends on the type of person. If you've got what we call a kinesthetic person or emotional person, sometimes you can just get in there and go, when you do this, this is how it's going to feel. Make a decision and bang, do it. And you'll find that most of the time those people react and it's instant. It's incredibly powerful. I can see changes of people when they've got their eyes closed. They just have a nice big deep breath in. Their whole personality changes. It's what we call a psychosomatic. So the mind-body connection. Once the mind has changed to a more positive outcome, it's amazing how the physiology changes instantly as well. And a lot of the time when you change the brain, the stomach being the second brain, you'll be surprised at how that does a massive detox as well. So it's not just the head, it's the body, it's the whole lot that does the same thing. Now, if you look at what we call analytical people tend to be slow as far as transformation. and the implementation of the suggestion. Sometimes it might take them 2 or 3 sessions, but generally if I don't have the major result by session 3, session 4, then I'll just go, hey, look, there's a certain controlling factor that these analytical people have that they want to be in control. So it's almost like I've just got to give them the opportunity and the processes to go ahead and make their own change. Even though all that information is in there, sometimes they want to be more in control of the actual process and the integration speed. But that's a typical process. If you look at a lot of the elite athletes and elite entrepreneurs that I work with, because the changes that we implement are so fast and so powerful, so positive, so quick, what actually happens is life actually has to catch up to them, because people start changing around. When you get a massive shift, everyone around them has to shift accordingly. And if people aren't ready for it, sometimes there's a lot of external factors in their life and a lot of things that happen that they actually have to deal with. So it creates more of an opportunity for them to come back and just keep fine-tuning the change. Because like with any business entrepreneur, as soon as they start becoming more and more successful, they're open up to a lot more personal attack, judgment, a greater risk. Same with a lot of the athletes. If you look at the Olympics as an example, it's a classic sign. You've got all these people at world level, Olympic level that are competing, and all of a sudden, bang, they've come back because they've just got out of that rhythm and out of that focus. It's a matter of, let's do some sessions while you're over there, and let's just do a gradual integration and getting them ready for it. So for example, some of my programs, I've got bronze, silver and gold programs. So it might be once a month, once a fortnight or once a week as far as programs. So if you look at like a lot of the NRL guys, they'll be on like a gold program. Professional golfers will be on there as well, because it's just such a mental game.
If I sort of came to you, for example, and or anyone came to you and wanted to, like, for example, like a runner, if they approached you and said, my goal in X number of months, like in a year's time, for example, I want to be able to run under a 3-hour marathon, or I've got a 100-mile ultra coming up in a year's time. I want you to hypnotize me so I can deal with sort of motivation issues with training. Do people sort of come to you for that?
Yeah, look, it's amazing what people do come to me with. And as we spoke before we started recording, generally what people come with is not the actual issue. So, look, as an example, motivation is only possible when you've got direction. So a lot of people might come and go, hey, look, I want motivation. My first questions would be, why? Why do you want the motivation? What's the end result? What do you want the motivation for? Because you've got to look, and for me, I've got to break it all down. Now, I work differently to what a sports psychologist would do. Okay, if you understand sports psychology and psychology, they're very good at creating awareness of what may or may not have happened in the past. They'll get you back there, they'll focus on the past, they'll pull it all apart to give you an understanding of what might be the reason why you're acting in a certain way now. That's all very well if you want to go backwards in life. So my approach is to go, right, who are you now and where do you want to be in that 3 months? Where do you want to be in that 12 months? What are the behaviours that you've got at the moment that aren't assisting you to achieve that in 3 months or 12 months? Because the behaviours you've currently got have been based on past experiences. Your unconscious mind is only there for one reason, that's to protect you from any potential hurt or potential harm. Now, for someone who's pushing themselves into a 100-kilometre race, the mind knows that that is potential hurt physically and emotionally, so it's always going to be wanting to slow you down, wanting you to question. It's always going to create self-sabotaging opportunities, but your why you want to do it has to be stronger than not doing it. It has to be stronger than anything you've ever done, because you're pushing yourself out of that comfort zone into potential hurt, potential harm, And that's all your unconscious mind is doing, is just protecting you. So it wants to slow you down. It wants to stop you. And that's where that mind chatter and that gut instinct comes from.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of, champions in pretty much any sport. I think the difference that makes someone a champion, or not necessarily like world number one, but someone who has sort of realised their own success in athletics, for example, I think it's those type of people who are willing to pull the trigger, give it 100%, regardless of whether they're going to potentially fail or not. What sort of tips or what sort of like advice or hypnosis techniques would you sort of prescribe to someone for pulling the trigger in certain times during, a sport that they might be playing?
Okay, as far as keeping them going?
Yeah, like for example, in tennis, with like Roger Federer, for example, when he was dominating, he would always attack. Even if he was on the defensive, he'd always be pulling the trigger, going for those shots.
Yep.
Whereas some people like, who's that guy that won, that Scottish guy? Andy Murray. Andy Murray sort of, in his sort of early career, he was almost there, but he wasn't quite at the level mentally as like Roger Federer.
Yep.
He was physically, pretty much at the same level skill-wise, but he didn't really have this is sort of early in his career, not really today. He didn't really have that killer instinct to pull the trigger and attack.
Yep. Okay, yeah. What I've done a lot of research with these guys. Because I've worked with 32 world champions and some incredible people and some amazing athletes. One thing always comes through, and it literally it's that self-belief. Now, Federer has this natural calming influence. He's got a natural game and style, and whereas Andy Murray, what he has done, his life's journey is to go out and see how high he can actually get within the rankings. If you look at Roger Federer, he went out saying, I'm going to be number one. This is what I'm going to do. He was so clear and defined in his outcome, and he wasn't stopping until he got it. So for me, I think if you can take anything from what I'm saying now is you've got to have something so clear as far as your end result. So I guess it's one of the main things I do is, right, who are you now? Where do you want to be in 12 months? Where do you want to be in 3 months? Where do you want to be in 5 years? So obviously, if we're looking at a sporting situation, what is that one thing you want to do? Whether it's winning, whether it's getting the podium, whether it's top 10, where it's just competing or even completing. Be very clear and very defined in your outcomes.
What about if we use the example of eating healthier?
Yep.
So, for example, let's just say someone comes to you and they're eating sort of, the standard Australian diet, just sort of fairly healthy, but occasionally eats crap,
Yep.
Processed food, junk food, heaps of sugar, that sort of stuff, just like a normal sort of person. If someone sort of came to you and said, I need to be hypnotized, or I need you to help me with me changing my diet, for example.
Yep.
I've tried going cold turkey by eliminating all sugar, no caffeine, no alcohol. And, I've stuck with it for a day and a half, and then the headaches have been too full on, and I've just sort of crashed and burned. If someone wanted to eat healthier, and sort of transition from like a standard Australian diet, for example, to to incorporate way more fruit and veggies in their diet, for example.
Yep.
How would you sort of approach that?
The approach is quite simple. Why? Why do you want to do it? What is the reason why you want that diet? What's the benefit of having that level of diet within your life? Because I can guarantee somewhere that there's some element of self-sabotage or fear of something. Because there's what we call masking agents in our mind. Okay, when our mind is in a bit of a negative state, we always look backwards. When we go backwards, we generally look at a lot of the negative experiences that haven't yet been processed. When we start slowing down, that's what happens. Our mind goes back to process information. If what is back there is negative, we're looking at what we call masking agents. So it actually moves, hides, changes, distorts, and bypasses all this stuff that's in our head. So the main masking agents are cigarettes, drugs, alcohol, food, and keeping busy. So I know that if someone's eating incorrectly, it's not because of lack of knowledge. It's because of, well, probably knowledge. Because it's not in their best interest to eat healthier, because when they eat healthier, they get full of energy. When they're full of energy, they go and start pushing themselves more physically and emotionally. So I look at what you guys will be doing as far as long distance competition and go, right, okay, well, the mind is going, well, that's a huge push. I don't know if I'm ready for that one. And it'll start self-sabotaging all the way back to potentially even into diet. So it's not the knowledge, it's the application of the knowledge that creates that change of actual diet. Again, if you're in a negative state, you only look backwards. And if you've always had that level of diet and you've always eaten the same thing, you only need to be slightly stressed and your mind is always going to go back to learnt behaviors and trigger-based response. Stress triggers, bang, automatically back to unhealthy eating.
Can you sort of how do you sort of change it so that in that example, if there's like a stress trigger, as you sort of just mentioned, people generally tend to revert back to bad behavior, for example, or bad habits. How do you change that to, okay, there's a stress trigger, and rather than reverting back to heaps of coffee, for example, or, poor nutritional choices, where you flip it and rather than choosing the poorer option, you revert to a better option, like a healthier option.
Yeah, it's what we call a trigger-based response. Okay, the trigger is stress. The response is automatically go back to rubbish food. It's like if we could use the example of driving along the freeway or driving along a road. You see a red light. What do? You stop. How do you know how to stop a car? Well, you've learned through past experiences. And it's through repetition that stopping at a traffic light becomes so automatic. The amount of calculations that happen in a single split second when you see a red light is just incredible. Based on the speed, based on conditions, based on the car, based on where do you stop? Do you stop on the line, behind the line, 5 cars back, or can you stop safely? There's a big bus coming through. See, all these calculations happen in a single split second, and it's what we call a trigger-based response. And over time, it becomes so automatic that you don't even have time to stop and think. So it's like that sports psychology model, which is think of a happy place, just think calm. It doesn't happen because your mind is automatically reverting instantly back to learned experiences. So if you look at that, that's what we call a trigger-based response, triggering, stress trigger, response, poor eating. Now, what we can do is what we call a pattern interrupt. A pattern interrupt will actually interrupt that automatic response of what you used to have. So instead of that red light going, oh, now I need to stop, we can have a different trigger, which will trigger a more positive response. So we've got to look at why you want to change your eating. Why is the benefit of being more energized and better nutrition for your long distances? So it's quite simple. When you get someone nice and deep and nice and relaxed and you're suggesting that every time you go back to the past and all of a sudden, bang, what happens is sometimes that pattern, that interruption based on that loud noise, that clap actually bypasses and, how would you put it, interrupts that automatic response back to past experiences. So we can predetermine what new response you want. So as soon as your mind gets into the stress trigger again, we've already counteracted it by going bang, and then trigger that new response. So what happens now is when you start thinking about eating, your mind, it might want to drift back to the past, but it's got this, I'm waiting for this big loud noise. And as soon as it's done that, it's interrupted that automatic response back to learned behaviors and starts learning the new behaviors that you've already predetermined.
So with, how you mentioned that example of, the loud clap, for example.
Yeah.
Can people have, do you sort of plant seeds where people can have, rather than the trigger-based response being like a loud clap, can it be sort of based on a feeling?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I find that something like that loud clap is good to get the information in there. And to actually stop that automatic response. Then when the client sort of comes back, I can say, right, every time you do this, you'll notice that that's now going to happen. So it becomes an automatic response. It's not as if you have to clap and then change it yourself, because all we're doing is changing the neural pathways, those automatic paths in your head that have been established over the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years. So once you had that pattern interrupt once, the mind is already going, what's going on? So you won't hear the clap. It is just that automatic response where it just simply shuts off the connection to previous reactions and then rewires it to the new version. And once you've done that once or two times, it's just a matter of just like learning to drive all over again when you hit that red light.
Yeah, so I guess the rewiring of your thought process, that can happen fairly quickly. G'day guys, Matt here. This podcast is a labour of love, and all episodes are researched, scheduled, edited, created and promoted in my spare time. Typically, after an episode has been recorded, it can take another 3 hours of post-production activities to get the final cut. If I'm providing you with value and you wish to support my vision of sharing these inspirational stories to the world, you can do so at borntokickarse.com and click on the Patreon banner. Your support will help to maintain the monthly podcast running costs and enable me to outsource repetitive tasks so I can bring you even more kick-ass episodes. Once again, if you want to support me in producing this podcast, head over to borntokickarse.com and click on the Patreon banner. You can't miss it. And now back to the rest of the show. Yeah, so I guess the rewiring of your thought process, that can happen fairly quickly.
Oh, it's instant. It's like anything we do. I mean, you hear these, what's that ad? It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. But either way, once you make a decision, it only takes a split second. Now, you could make a decision to move interstate. There's a lot of background work, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of everything else. But once that decision is made, it only takes a split second to decide yes or no. Even whether you choose to sit down and have a coffee, it still takes the same amount of time to do that as it does to get married, as an example.
Now, one of the main sort of fears, like it sort of tops every poll, and everyone's heard of it. What's the biggest thing that everyone fears the most? And they sort of say death is number 2.
Yeah.
Public speaking's number 1.
Yep.
If someone came to you, athlete or not, just like anyone, and they said, I've got a fear of public speaking, whether it's in front of a handful of people or a room full of people.
Yep.
How can you help me? And how would you approach that?
Yeah, quite simple. I just generally throw it back to the individual client. Again, once, as I said earlier, every person I work with has got an individual process that I specifically designed for them. So what would happen in situation, my mind has just automatically gone to, okay, so describe fear. What actually is it? So how would you describe fear, Matthew?
Fear is of like trying to get your head around something that's unknown.
Yep.
Something that you may not have done, and you're just sort of playing out endless scenarios in your mind.
For sure. So based on that, fear it's an uncertain, but at the time for you, it's real. It's a feeling. It created through a thought, correct?
Yeah.
So I look at it and go, right, okay, well, who chooses your emotions?
Yeah, I do.
Who chooses your actions, behaviors, beliefs, habits? You do.
Yeah.
So you're in control. So when you think about it, if you're in control, why are you choosing to react in this feared way? And if you can choose to react that way, I can guarantee it's because of past learnt behaviors. Now, if you haven't actually done public speaking before, you'll probably find that there's a whole group of people out there and go, oh, public speaking, it's scary. It's the worst thing in the world. So people have this predetermined belief through other people's experiences that will actually potentially form yours if there's an issue and if you allow it. So again, it's that same sort of thing to go, right, okay, well, I'm sitting in the room now. Where are you sitting at the moment, Matthew?
Yeah, just my office.
Okay, here's a question. Can you have a fear of sharks where you're sitting?
No.
Okay. If you're standing on the beach, can you have a fear of sharks?
Yeah, you could.
How?
Because of the where you're at, the environment. You know,
Okay.
there is a potential because it's water. You know.
Okay, you're standing on the beach though, on the sand. Is it possible?
Shark attack on the sand. No,
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So can you actually have a fear of sharks on that sand?
I think you could. Yeah.
Okay. So how come you couldn't where you're sitting now, but you can on the beach?
Just the environment.
Yeah. Can you, with one toe in the water, can you have a fear of sharks there?
I'd say some people could have a fear of sharks.
Well, that's the thing, though. They're in there. You can guarantee they're in the water and you're now in their environment.
Yeah.
So you can. So the other question is, okay, if you're up to your neck in water and there's one hanging off your leg, is that a fear?
No.
It's reality.
Yeah.
It's reality. So you've got to look at it and go, right, okay, we know what reality is, but where is fear? Fear is created in the head based on potential hurt, potential harm. And that's exactly what that unconscious mind does. It's going, hang on, this is not our environment. So we look at it and go, right, if we can choose to be like that, we can also choose to not have that element of fear. And fear is just a thought, and that thought creates a sensation. Now, I'll give you an experience of one of my junior athletes, a 400-meter hurdler, #1 in Australia. Now, I started working with him because he was nervous. He was throwing up 2 or 3 days before an event. He was coming up to state titles and national titles. And he came in kicking and screaming. His coach dragged him in. 17-year-old kid. And he was running 56.5 when I first met him. And what we did is he was talking. He's going, I've got this feeling, this nerves right in the middle of my chest. And I said, okay, just rip it out and hold it out in front of you and tell me, how big is it? What color is it? Is it heavy? Is it light? Is it hot? Is it cold? The other question is, why are you holding on to it? And it just threw him for a sec. And I've gone, hang on, if you've got that sensation in your chest and you pull it out and you just throw it on the ground, take a big deep breath in now, how are you feeling? He goes, actually, pretty good. I said, all you've done is created, through your thought, you've created that sensation through that automatic response into your chest. You literally pull out that sensation, you look at it and you question it and go, right, what is that? It's that unconscious mind. It's the uncertainty. It's a questioning. It's a doubting. It's a fear. I said, throw it away. What actually happened is just incredible. Now, after 3 sessions, about 4 or 5 weeks, we had one of the state titles. Now, this guy had actually, like I said, he was #1 in the country, 400-meter junior hurdler. He ran, and his next 5 races were all personal bests. After 3 weeks, he got the state title at 52.6, so he dropped 3.9 seconds. Now, 3.9 seconds kind of sounds pretty good. what actually happens, his average running speed, if you look at that 3.9 seconds, it was close to 27.5 metre gain on where he used to be, purely through nerves, doubts and fears, removing those. So when you think of that, that's close to, I think it's about 8-9%, something around there, improvement or reduction in time. And he was already number one in the country. Now, you can't get that level of change in result. How long would it take you physically to train to reduce your time by 3.9 seconds at that level? So it's all about managing the emotions, managing the fear. The fear is just a sensation and a reaction based on a thought. Now, if your thought now went, oh, what's in my chest? Oh, belief, confidence, calmness, relax, it's going to trigger that response and you'll do really well.
Yeah, it's interesting how the mind sort of, you know, when it's stressed and it sort of reverts backwards, it sort of sees the glass as half empty. You know, you always sort of see the negative or the, it might be just like a habit, you know. Yeah, it's interesting hearing, you know, it's just a simple change in your view, your change in your mindset.
Yeah, and that's what I said before. The unconscious mind has only got one job. That's protect you from any potential hurt, potential harm. So it's gone, right, okay, I've experienced this before. It wasn't good, so therefore why are you pushing me towards this again? It's just going to put the brakes on and it's just going to hold you back. And that's exactly what it does. It's just so incredibly powerful, the mind, and it's so incredibly stupid.
What happens if someone is injured or they've got an injury, for example, in whatever sport they've done or do?
Yep.
And it's been a big injury, and they sort of come to you and say, I'm sort of working through this injury that I've had, and I want to. The injury is causing a lot of mental blockages.
Yep.
And I want to be able to, like, I'll do physical stuff to try and address it at a physical level. You know, I'll do sort of rehab or certain strengthening exercises, for example, to try and get the physical injury stronger. Yep. But to clear the mental blockages or the mental sort of doubt that the physical injury has caused, do you get many sort of athletes coming in and with, you know, that particular scenario?
Yeah, there's quite a lot. Look, I've come from obviously the martial arts background, so I've done a lot of my own injury repair as such. So I'll just work on the injury side of things to start with, because our mind has got an incredible ability when we can harness it to repair our bodies. So this is not even getting into the mind aspect of getting back into sport. This is literally being able to heal yourself. Now, we've got this incredible ability that if you cut your finger, it bleeds. It bleeds, it creates a scab. Underneath that scab, it starts healing itself. The scab falls off, the scar over time, it disappears. We don't have to tell our body to do it. It's just got this natural ability to be able to do it. Now, I've worked with people with basically told they've got 3 months to live. They've got the cancer and it's terminal. And here we are 8, 9, 10 years later. I'm still getting a postcard on the 1st of January every year, because we question our belief that your body has got this natural ability. It knows there's something bad in there. Allow it to push it out. Allow it to fight it. And I've worked with a lot of sports physios, a lot of sports, conditioning people, weights people, massage therapists, because their clients have got this recurring issue that might be stress triggered or injury related or mental. And if you've ever seen like a lot of medical shows, you've seen the red and white blood cells shooting down a tube. Even through the power of visualization, we can send all the red and white blood cells down to the foot or something, or a muscle, and we can allow it to actually heal itself with or without you even knowing. It's just an incredibly powerful experience, and we can generally heal injuries in half the time. So if anyone is interested in that, injury repair, that's another major process that can actually be done through the mind and body. Now, when you look at coming back from injury, again, we go back to the conscious mind. It's got one job: protect you. It knows it's got an injury. It also understands that it's now going to start compensating for that. That injury is going to be in the front of the mind, which means potentially it's going to start holding back. And when you hold back, if you can imagine like an NRL player, it's not in their best interest to hold back, because if they go in soft at a tackle and the other person comes in hard, they're going to go backwards. But if you go in hard and the other opposition is coming in soft, you're going to go over the top of them. It's just impact and energy. So there's an element of potentially holding themselves back for self-protection, self-preservation. And one of the major things I'd work with, like even with race drivers I'm working with, what they do is dangerous. They have to understand that what they do is dangerous. As long as that awareness is there and they're willing to go through it and they're willing to be hurt by it, then they're likely to push through any potential injury that may or may not occur from that.
What about like personality types? For example, you could possibly classify or categorize people maybe into two sort of main categories, like introverts and extroverts.
Yep.
Can hypnosis change someone's sort of fundamental personality type, whether they're an introvert and turn them to an extrovert, or vice versa, extrovert, make them an introvert? Can hypnosis do that or not?
It really depends on how long I'd actually work with someone. Look, there's certain personalities that have been created through past life experiences. If someone's been in a very traumatic experience, if they've been very limited and restricted and suppressed all their life, if they've got the potential to be this incredible, flamboyant, out there type of personality, yeah, we can do that. So it's not hard in that respect, because once you start, empowering them and freeing them from these negative emotions that they've been dragging along for their life, the real version of themselves comes out. But on saying that, again, you get the average accountant, they're accountant because they think logically over a certain aspect of life. So you're not going to get accountants who are really out there and just living life large. They're not really hyperactive and get really excited by numbers. So it's, how would you put it? Hypnosis is like, I use examples sometimes of training dolphins. Okay, dolphins have got natural skill set in the wild. You see them jumping, flipping, twisting, you see them on their tail. But what hypnosis does, it's like the dolphin trainer, a trigger-based response. So on blowing a whistle, you can get a dolphin over time to do a certain trick based on that trigger, i.e. the whistle. You can get them to expand those normal behaviors, and that's pretty much all it is. So you've got to look at the person you're starting with, and you've got to look at a lot of the behind the scenes. How much were they limited, restricted? How much were they empowered as children? Because that can all change for sure.
If someone wanted to, maintain like a positive mindset in a particular discipline,
yeah,
can they hypnotize themselves, or do they need an external party or an external person to do the hypnosis?
Oh, look, all hypnosis to some extent is self-hypnosis. Now, when I'm working with a client, it's their self that allows them to drop into this place. So all I do is basically facilitate it and apply the processes to allow them to make that change internally through their own choices. When I've got the average athlete or any athlete, basically, I actually teach them a process or several processes in the way through. Quite simply, sitting down, closing your eyes and potentially meditating for 20 minutes in that quiet space it's self-hypnosis, it's meditation, it's mindfulness, it's visualization, it's whatever label you want to put on it. It's exactly the same. There's certain processes that you can apply that go, right, all you need to do is visualize yourself in 12 months from now crossing the finish line at whatever event you're going to do. That is powerful enough to start changing the neural pathways within your mind. And when I get athletes to do that every night while they're going to sleep, what their mind is actually doing is processing the outcome. It's what we call implied suggestion. If you can imagine yourself crossing the finish line in 12 months, the implied suggestion is you got there. You're fit enough to be competitive, to get there, which means you must have slept well, you must have trained well, you must have until it comes back to today. So visualizing yourself in the future, very, very effective. That's the best form of meditation, self-hypnosis, anything you can do, because it's your world, your life, your experience, your result that you establish based on the choices you make. Very powerful.
Some people would come to you and, whatever scenario they're sort of presenting to you.
Yeah.
One scenario might be moving from a bad situation to a good situation, or from a negative to a positive. What about if someone approaches you and they're already in a positive state and they want to maintain that positive state? Is that sort of different at all? Like, for example...
No, to be honest, look, the model that I explained earlier, which is if that was a psychologist, they'd be lost. They wouldn't know what to do because they're trained to actually find the reasons why you're in that situation. Now, with a positive person, for me, it's all about, right, how do we empower that person? How do we capture that so that any future actions, reactions, or experiences that are potentially coming through, we can pre-arm and predetermine and capture that emotional state, which is everything's going awesome, and apply it in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months in advance. So we're creating like a positive outcome, a positive catalogue of emotions, and we can actually, this is how I get people into the zone, we can actually capture certain emotions and trigger them through a response. So if I get a swimmer, as soon as the goggles go on, I get them to take a big deep breath in and breathe in as the goggles go on, because that's like putting them in that superhero suit, basically, as it is. With a golfer, as soon as they grab the golf club, it's almost like they go into their own self-hypnosis trance state. Tiger Woods has used hypnosis. If you look at Andre Agassi in tennis, he used the same. Michael Jordan of Chicago Bulls, to their 6 NBL titles, exactly the same. British cycling team, they've got their own dedicated hypnotherapist. So it's out there, it's being widely used, but it's knowing how and why to actually do it. Now, I've actually got a published book as well, which is called the Dear Diary Process. And if anyone is interested, I'll work out with Matthew some way, or maybe some link that you can get a copy of the ebook. I'm just going through some new printed copies at the moment. But the Dear Diary Process is all about creating tomorrow's outcomes in advance. So most people, when they write a diary, write what they did today. And this is created through a professional golfer on the 17th of March 2010 who said, I write in my diary every night. And I went, why? It's history. You've done it. What's the benefit of writing what you've already done, especially if it was bad? Because the way our mind works, when we go to sleep, as I said before, your mind goes back to process information. And if you've had a bad day, it's processing bad day, and you're going to wake up and you're going to have a bad day. So I said, why not write tomorrow in advance? Like I woke up, went and picked up my new clubs, felt awesome, felt amazing. It was the first time I grabbed these new clubs. I can imagine myself winning the British Open. I could see myself doing this. I was walking and just everything was so easy and so free from the very first swing. And as I walked from that shot to the next shot, I just appreciated everything in my life now, and got to the end after 18 holes and finished with a 8 under 68 or 8 under 66 or whatever it might be. And I thought, wow, that's actually pretty powerful. So this guy actually did it as well as I did it that night. And I tell you what, the next day was just incredible, because what happens the way that when you go to sleep, your mind processes whatever's in it. So before you go to sleep, the whole concept of this diary process is you put all your intention about how tomorrow was in advance, using the past tense words. So I woke up, I felt this way, I achieved this, I did that. This is how training went. That's how the competition went. This is what happened. Got into a bit of a, like you might have one of your long distance things. Halfway through, my mind started chatting. I just simply took a deep breath in, smiled, yelled out a certain word, and bang, I was off again. Totally in focus and totally in the zone. So it's nice to be able to do that. But what actually happens is as you are sleeping, your mind is rewiring itself to create that outcome that you've predetermined. It's a very, very powerful process that I use it on a daily basis still.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating when you sort of delve into the mind, particularly from like a hypnosis point of view, or even sort of psychology. Yeah, that's the way I see it. It is all mindset, and turning a can't into a can.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Unfortunately, the whole stereotypical skepticism about, or I've got an issue, but it's amazing that people are so cautious about going, oh, I've got an issue of mental health week, I think is this week. People go, oh, but I don't have a mental issue. I don't want to go to see a psychologist because I don't have problems. I don't want to bring up my past. And that's where my model as how I work is so easy, because it's just simply, this is who you are. That's who you want to be. What do we need to change now to make the future happen? And there's certain fundamentals that exist that are always in operation in our mind. And when you apply any one of those fundamentals to current behaviours, everything makes sense.
Yeah, there was a good example. Like I follow the UFC. I'm a big fan of the UFC. There was a champion. His name was Matt Hughes. He was the former welterweight champion. He was arguably sort of one of the best welterweights of all time. Him and George St. Pierre. One sort of quote that he said that sort of stuck with me was, like, he defended the belt numerous times.
Yep.
Every time he went into the championship fight, he didn't go into it thinking, I'm going to defend the belt.
Yeah.
He went into it with the mindset, I'm going to win a world title.
Yeah.
So, and his achievements speak for themselves, but I sort of found that quite powerful. Rather than going in with the mindset, I'm going to defend this title.
Yep.
Rather, he went in with the mindset, I'm going to win this world title, a new world title.
Exactly, and that's what happens in a lot of mindset. Let's look at golfers, for example. They manage to fight their way to the lead, and next thing they've dropped off by 10 shots because they have this, let's go, attack. They get to the front, and then they go, oh, got to defend. Now, no golfer trains to defend. They all go to get the lowest score. It's the same with this UFC fighter. Is basically he's changed in what we call reframing the situation, because he knows when it comes to defense, it's all about playing safe. It's all about protecting your position. Whereas when you attack, that's what got him to that world title to start with. So you may as well train that way. You may as well perform that way, that you're going out to get it rather than I'm defending it, because it's so much more powerful.
So how long have you been doing this for?
Literally, I did my training 10 years ago, and I walked out of there. It was on the 9th of March 2006. Yeah, March 2006. So I literally just clicked over my 10-year anniversary of my first client.
You do this as a job, and you're dealing with clients all the time.
Yeah, this is my full-time profession career. I've basically retired from life and just doing this because I love it.
Yeah. Do you has your mindset? Have you sort of reprogrammed your own view and your own sort of mind? And
oh, mate, absolutely. Who I was 15 years ago is just incredible. You wouldn't want to look sideways at me or want to beat someone up. I was a very angry 30-year-old. Because a relationship finished, a marriage finished, my father passed away, a company I was working with was bought out, I was merged into another company, and everything just seemed to be against me. And what was interesting is this is, I guess, where a lot of my energy went to within my martial arts and training. It was my way out, it was my release, and it wasn't until I got injured, and then all of a sudden it was like, now what? So what I've actually done is I've used that, I guess, experience of being in that dark, very dark place for years. And the processes I've used through my experience through hypnosis, sport, and using my mum, I've actually created some very fast, powerful, and unique processes for a quick, instant result. And it's through my experiences and my continuous self-improvement myself that have actually formed a lot of these concepts and processes that they're now teaching internationally in a lot of courses.
Yeah, no, it's been fascinating speaking with you and getting an insight into, sports hypnosis and everything. Whereabouts can people find you online? And, if they want to, your programs, are they done online, or do people need to come in and see you? Or?
Well, I've got face-to-face processes, and because Skype is so good now, or Zoom, I can pretty much work with any athlete anywhere in the world. I've got a international soccer superstar that just mentioned his name, and you go, "Oh, really? He's yours?" I went, "Yup." But he's one of those secret clients that I have. Is basically he doesn't want the world to know what he's doing because he just finds it so much easier now to perform. So hence my brand is the Athlete's Secret Weapon, and you can find me on athletesecretweapon.com website. You can find Athlete's Secret Weapon on Facebook. You can find it on Twitter, and you can find me on Instagram as Athlete's Secret Weapon.
Have you ever had a athlete approach you who wants to defeat or has a particular rival, and the rival has also approached you wanting to beat that first person? You're sort of in between. Have you ever had that?
Yeah. Oh, look, it's fascinating. I've had, I'll just say, 2 Australian high jumpers. And what's interesting is one of them came to me and I worked with her, and then I got a phone call from someone else and said, "Oh, I'm a high jumper." And I just noticed that so many people are getting so much better around me, and somehow I'm just feeling like I'm going backwards. So can I work with you? And next thing, she's talking about the other one, and they're both talking to me. And I said, "Look, it's totally confidential." And I went out to one of the state titles in Queensland at QE2 Stadium. And they said, "Look, when you see me, just don't acknowledge me, because I don't want to be seen to be working with you, because I don't want to let any or my opposition know that I'm actually working with you." And what was interesting, I walked past the high jump bar in the actual area, walked past one girl from one direction. She kind of looked at me, acknowledged, smiled. And when I walked back the other direction, the other girl was doing the same thing.
All right.
So it's actually quite funny because you could see them both getting higher and higher in their levels and both breaking new PBs. And they're looking at each other going, "Oh, I think I know what you're doing, but I'm not going to ask you in case you are, because I might have just given out my secret." So in that respect, yes, it is interesting, but it's also that same situation that the one with the greatest potential and ability and skill is always going to outperform anyone. So if you've got 2 athletes both using my program, if someone, to be honest, can run a 2-hour marathon and someone else's PB is 2 hours 10, if you're both at your potential, the 2-hour one is always going to win. Okay, so I can't get anyone to outperform their potential. What I can do is get them to perform at the potential and more consistently every time. And that's one thing I urge any athlete. You've got to be doing some mind training. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating.
So I've got, the online programs. I've got face-to-face programs, Skype programs, or any combination of. I do a lot of corporate workshops. I work with a lot of CEOs and sporting teams.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I'll put those links in the show notes. And thanks again for coming on.
I appreciate it. Thanks for connecting, and I hope everyone's got something out of it.
Yep, no worries. Okay, thanks a lot, Stuart.
Fantastic. Thanks, mate.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
You've just been listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast at borntokickarse.com. If you liked what you heard and want more, please subscribe on iTunes. Give a 5-star rating and a Kick Arse review. This really helps to boost our presence and continues to allow us to introduce you to the most fascinating people on the planet. Welcome aboard, and catch you next time.